Welcome, everybody.
Welcome, welcome.
Oh, we got a great crowd here today.
We'll wait a couple more minutes.
See some familiar faces in the audience. More names.
We have Kirsty Nurka. Kirsty.
Arlene made it out today. Hello, Coach.
Hey, Coach.
How come we cannot see more than 2 screens?
If you click...
So only the panel can see each other? I'm in the gallery view.
I think, yeah.
I only see the panel.
I think if you press speaker,
Angelica.
change from speaker view to gallery view at the top right. And to my family broadcasting downstairs on the TV that's very loud, could you turn down the volume a little? There's a bit of a delay.
That's awesome.
I'll feel like I'm talking to myself the entire time.
Yeah, I see only the panel.
Mm-hmm.
That's all right. The most important thing is that we already have 84 participants. We'll wait, I guess, for a few more minutes, folks. But it's great to see so many people joining the show. That's really heartwarming, especially in these times.
Look, only Jacob has his nachos ready to go.
Doritos.
Oh, much classier.
Yeah.
The sweet chili heat.
We just hit 100, which is good. 13 panelists and 88 participants. Is it maybe a good idea to start at 100?
Amazing.
Maybe everybody call some friends to also log in so we can get started.
Bring him up. I think we're ready to...
Angelica, did you actually want to start us off with the acknowledgements? I think that would be...
So indeed, maybe Angelica, if you use the time now to say something about the industrial design program, and then take a few minutes, and then we can give the panel to Reed and Claire and the other kind of moderators.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to start with OCADU's land acknowledgement. So it's actually a settlers acknowledgement, Northern Indigenous acknowledgement, as some other people may have called it. OCAD University acknowledges the ancestral and traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat, who are the original owners and custodians of the land on which we stand and create here at OCAD University. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all and almost, over 100 people to this opening, which is quite exciting for everyone. And I would love to thank all the students, the faculty, particularly Claire, Reed, Aidan, and Jo Burgers to make this happen and transition so quickly in this different format. Unfortunately, we can't be on the 5th floor, but we have the 5th behind us. Before we start, I wanted to give a brief description of the Industrial Design program for the people that may be less familiar with what industrial design is. For some people, it's quite confusing because it can be so many things. So I just want to use a little bit of time before we hand over to our proper host to read our description out to you. So the industrial design bridges the gap between what is and what is possible. The industrial design program at OCAD positions its practice within the current and future challenges facing our society, such as the coronavirus that we are finding ourselves amidst. As a transdisciplinary profession, industrial design harnesses research and making in order to reframe challenges and co-create solutions that include user-centered products, systems, services, and experiences. Studying industrial design at OCADU University means asking questions, breaking out of conventions, and getting acquainted with multiple perspectives and different ways of knowing. And I hope that the website that our students created, and the link will come up for you in a minute, will showcase that. So we'll kind of like this panel of speakers and the panel of alumni that are going to share their perspectives with us today. And we're actually quite old program. Since 1949, now in the fourth industrial revolution, industrial design at OCADU University has cultivated a relentless motivation to understand the future, and within that, the role that products, services, and interactions play in informing behaviors and transforming relationships. It is at the intersection between users, technology, the economic, social, and the environmental sphere that industrial design excels in ultimately shaping the creation of culture. And today, and the last weeks, and maybe for quite some time now in the future, we're dealing with design for disruption and transformation. But I think the current pandemic provides an opportunity for all of us, including our students and alumni, to take the responsibility and practice the above, taking under consideration and bring the industrial design approach to reframing the post-COVID future in a way that is more equitable and sustainable than the one that we are leaving behind. Thank you.
Ooh, thank you very much, Angelica. Great introduction to industrial design.
Yay, yay.
Thank you very much. And for everyone else in the audience, who just joined us, I'd like to thank you to our opening reception of the 5th OCADU's Industrial Design Grad Show in this live webinar. We have an amazing panel here tonight of the OCADU faculty, some alumni, and some recent graduates here, all to talk about industrial design. If anyone in the audience has any questions they'd like to put forth, there's a little Q&A box at the bottom of the live webinar. Feel free to put something in there, and we'll select 3 for the end of the show. And feel free to comment in our live Facebook or on our Instagram profile as well. So, to start off, why the 5th? When the Industrial Revolution, the first, began in the mid-1700s, it was marked by the increasing mechanization of production. And the rise of steam power acted as the source of engine that set these gears in motion. However, these shifts in technology and society did not stop there. The second industrial revolution came, introducing the use of electricity as well as standardization of mass production lines. And the third industrial revolution, accompanied with the rise of computers that automated these production lines, they increased the work efficiency and they further expanded our economies of scale. Today, we find ourselves entering the fourth industrial revolution. It brings with it a new level of connection, not just between people, but between objects as well, blurring these lines between the physical and the digital world. This year's theme, the 5th, is our vision of the world's next industrial revolution, realized through the amazing works of our industrial design students. It is also a little tongue-in-cheek nod toward the 5th floor, where many of best years at OCAD took place. Our hosts tonight will be 2 amazing graduating students who have spent many a sleepless night on that floor. It is my pleasure to introduce everyone to Miss Claire Wu and Mr. Farzad Arasadeghi.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the opening reception. We honestly didn't think we'd make it to GradEx, but in the true spirit of design, we've adapted to the times.
For the first time ever, we're bringing you a virtual opening reception to our student-organized grad show 5th. We're very excited to see everyone happy and healthy. Earlier this year, as students, our reality consisted of going to school, having a physical environment for collaborating with our peers, building, testing, and presenting our ideas, then returning to a place to reflect on the day and plan for tomorrow. We were hopeful about the opportunities that 2020 held. Graduates were not expecting the challenges that COVID-19 would bring.
We are currently redefining what's normal. There's a global pandemic rocking every sector, but advancements in tech have given experts the tool to better navigate these uncertain times. Although these may be difficult times, we're the most capable we've ever been. We wanted to call on the expertise of our mentors to speculate on the future of design together.
Introducing our panel of faculty, Alexander Manu, Strategic Foresight Advisor, author, speaker, and educator.
Angelika Zischoff-Vires, co-founder of speculative design firm Radical Norms, and educator and chair of industrial design at OCADU.
Jules Goss, an educator and previously a designer in residence at Baycrest.
Job Rutgers, a senior educator, design strategist with VUCA Innovation, and an expert in the interaction and ambient experience design.
Rainey Lee, an educator and co-founder of Thinking Forward, a children's educational service focused on leadership and character building.
And joining us for our second segment of the day, our alumni.
Denise Earle, designer at Humanistic.
Jacob Kogan, design consultant at IBM.
My man Javid Nasir, design consultant at IBM.
Nick Coppolar, founder of Studio and Workshop Area 91. Now, the first topic is about work-life balance. Work-life separation becomes more pronounced when we work from home. Angelika and Job, how do you define productivity when 9 to 5 is no longer the norm? All right, Job, you start us off.
So first of all, before we get started, guys, awesome. I really feel honored to be part of this virtual opening. I feel it has all the vibes of a real one, and maybe it's even better because I didn't know you guys were such an amazing TV personalities. So I can always consider a second career. You guys got it. The first thing I'd like to say about changing work balance is that, you know, we happen kind of to stare a lot of our screens. And so the first thing that I want to share with the audience is something very counterintuitive, namely is to get away from the screen. So what I try to do, you know, when I'm working is actually I try to draw, I try to walk, I try to go outside, because real thinking and real creativity does not happen on the computer. The computer is a great tool to communicate, to share, to produce. But a lot of the thinking capacity happens with your hands, happens with your head, and is best stimulated in other kinds of places. So whenever you can, try to have the mental hygiene to go away from the screen, because screen time does not equal productivity. Actually, it's the opposite. That's my first opening statement. I got many more, but I also want to ask and hear from Angelika.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, work life, I think particularly having kids here at home, a 10-year-old that was running around earlier and a 7-year-old running around. I think for me, particularly as a female faculty member, I find it's an opportunity right now to reframe the etiquette, how we work, and that maybe family can become a better part of our lives, or more integrated as we used to have it. I mean, Rennie and I had kids running around in our offices, less in the classroom. And I think what's quite exciting, and what I hear from a lot of female professionals is, you bring, or your colleagues are much more part of your life when you have kind of like kids Zoom dropping into you. But I think for me, or for us personally, having the flexibility to tend to the kids or reschedule things, being dragged away from the screen is quite exciting and quite amazing. Also, having your kids join you when you're drawing or scribbling is a lot of fun, and I have to say that I'm hoping what we uncover now with this different work setting, and I think the CEO of Twitter went the right way when he made it optional for their staff to return back to work, physical work, because a lot of studies actually have shown that you work much more effectively when you can be in charge of your own time and accommodate the ways you can work best, and also taking or handing over a bit of agency to your workers. So, I mean, we did that with you. I hope students say, hey, it's your responsibility and we trust you. And I think I'm hoping that this situation will allow us to renegotiate and give more agency to people in the way they want to work, create, and live. So yeah, I think that's my personal takeaway.
Definitely.
Can I build on that, moderator?
For sure.
So I'd like to echo what Angelica said in giving agency and autonomy. One of the great pleasures that I had in working with you guys to develop, or to basically help you develop this website and everything else, was a situation of trust and dissolving boundaries. Now, I wrote a bit about that, on some other platform where I said that for me, teaching design, the best thing that could happen actually if boundaries between teachers and students dissolve, between private and the classroom, or between design studio and the classroom dissolve, and you just all together work on a killer design project and you try to get it done. And you can't control it. There's no, let's say, 12-3 boundaries. Boundaries dissolve, and it only works through agency and autonomy. And so in the futures, and the future is going to look different than what we have today. There will be the inclination to try to organize everything with lots of spreadsheets and other agendas and calendars. But I think what Angelica, brought forward is autonomy and agency, giving people the trust to do that. And my sense is, and you guys are the living evidence of that, that you actually do a lot more if you are given, the task to actually do those things. So that's also something maybe in the future to write about, like how that was as an experience, because the GradEx was not about a mark, right? It was not about the grade. It was not about a project. It was about getting it done because it had to be done. And I think you guys delivered. I mean, this all is working, flawless. The website looks amazing. My colleagues told me all over that, the Instagram account is on fire. So this is for me an example of how, this is how I would like to teach design in such a way. And of course, the first year is maybe a bit challenging, but trust, autonomy, agency, more fluid boundaries, open-ended projects, getting it done. Yeah, that's a lot of fun. It was really enjoying.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think you both make a really good point. I think giving somebody responsibility, giving somebody autonomy, and actually plugging it into real life, I think puts people into motion. And if you know that something that you're about to make has impact and has people will be able to interact with it in real life, I think that makes things super exciting. And I think that was what this GradEx committee process was like for us, because it was another project that we took on to work on the side. So yeah, thank you faculty members also for supporting us, because a lot of this outreach wouldn't have been possible without the help that you guys gave us. So really, really appreciate that.
Yes, thank you so much. You talked a little bit about the future. I want to know, Alex and Angelica, when you think about the future, or when we have a lot of time to think about the future, what's the biggest thing you foresee changing in the industry when social isolation is lifted?
Angelica.
Okay, let me unmute.
Who wants to go first?
You can
After
go
you've
first,
offered.
Alex.
Okay.
Alex, would you like to go first?
The biggest changes, sure.
Well, I can.
So the question was, can you rephrase the question? What are the challenges of in the professional sense?
Well, what is the biggest thing? What is the biggest thing you foresee changing? So whether it's in terms of the industry, so whether that's the way we collaborate with one another, but we've already seen major changes, but yeah.
Sure. Well, here is an interesting thing that happened the last 2 months. Everybody became either a foresight specialist or they became very interested in foresight, because that's the only conversation around right now. What will the future bring? And that's very much a thing that foresight people do. I see the distancing disruption as one of the biggest disruptions ever, probably more than anything else I can think of, because it affects every single branch of industry and every single domain in which proximity was an essential element. And that involves social life, involves entertainment, involves everything, which means by definition, by implication, that the role of design in the future will be way more speculative and way more connected to foresight than ever before, because we will have to reimagine all the interactions that were once physical, taking place in a different way, but delivering the exact same experience, if not even better. As an example of the same experience, if not even better, this forum right now. This forum right now would have never existed if not for the disruption. And we haven't done anything like this in the past. And the quality of our interaction right now is way different than the quality of any interaction in the past, which was physical. But physicality of interaction brings a very superficial element, which says we are together, therefore we are together. No, we are together doesn't mean we are together. Right now we are together, because right now our minds, our attention, our focus is here. So I'm extremely optimistic in terms of the future. I'm always optimistic, but right now even more so. Design traditionally has thrived, usually after major disruptions, and that's valid for the Gulf War, valid for 9/11, valid for 2008, valid for everything that I noticed in my life. So I'm very optimistic.
Awesome, thank you so much. Angelica, what changes do you foresee happening?
I think we'll see both. Right now, we have to grapple with physicality a lot, and how we deal with space, personal space around us, public spaces, and how we'll redefine those. And at the same time, we see ourselves in this kind of like digital world, which we need to negotiate in order to work together, collaborate, and so forth. And I think the big questions for us will be, and I'm grateful actually for the disruption, because I feel maybe that's what every generation feels, but we are rushing around, and it's almost like taking a break for reflection right now, to see. And a similar thing, I think, at least happened for me in the 2008 and 9 financial crash, where we like hold our breath for a bit and looked around and really thought about, okay, what is meaningful for us? What do we need? What do we want to bring forward into this into the future? What's important to us personally as a global race in this planet that we are sharing? Is it the nicer and cleaner air that we're enjoying right now, or the streets where kids can run around without being driven over by a car necessarily? I think so. I really appreciate this kind of like moment of taking a breath. I'm hoping that by engaging co-design activities, what we've been training you on for a while, we'll find ways in which we can come together to define these futures together. My critique on foresight is always that it ends up in reports and visualization, and I think now we have to make it real. And that's where the real strength of industrial design, speculative design, and critical design comes in, that we use our three-dimensional space and offer our skills and our material making and confronting people with these physically built realities. Of course, they can also be digitally built, but I think it's the prime time right now for our profession, or what we are hoping that you will bring to the profession moving forward, because you should climb over our backs and shape it your way. So I think those are my thoughts right now.
Awesome. You spoke a little bit about reflection and taking time. Oh yeah, go for it. Of course.
Can I do one more? Sure. Two things I want to add to this whole thing. This disruption is accelerating the timeline of many of the things designers talked about for the last 15 years. So it's accelerating the diminishing importance of retail, accelerating the online experience in a major way. But what it's also doing in a very interesting and, in my view, eye-opening way, it's reinstating government as a core participant in our life. And that is a major, major issue that we need to discuss a bit more at one point, and we need to embrace, and we need to celebrate. Because right now, we clearly demonstrated that we depend on government. And also, to my surprise and my delight, government has came up to the bat, and they actually performed really, really well. And every student that will receive a few $1,000s this summer will attest to the validity of what I just said. So I think that's a very important thing. And because of all of these things that are changing, including the fact that effectively right now, 40% of Canadians are on basic income. In other words, they're not working. So even that has been proven to be working as a paradigm shift. So I think overall, design needs to start thinking of what role it might play in this reshaping of the economic system, in which traditional organizations like CPGs, consumer packaged goods and so on, will have very, very little role to play.
Awesome, thank you. I think it's important to acknowledge that we do have this time to reflect and think about the future of design, and that wouldn't be possible without all the essential workers who are on the front line. And we do have this sort of responsibility. And I guess in the next section, Claire can speak about that too.
Yeah, so this next question is for Randy and Jules. Design for health is changing rapidly with the shifts in the social, political, and economic landscape. So what challenges and opportunities do you foresee in design for health in the coming months and also post-corona era?
Sorry, unmuted myself. Ronnie, do you want to start on this one?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Claire. I think it's become pretty evident, right? When you read the news and follow the news, that there are many challenges ahead of us or in front of us right now, but I can't even begin to claim that we would know the full scope of all the challenges yet. But I think with the challenges that we do see, I think it's, and Alex had mentioned it and Angelica mentioned it earlier, that I think it proves to be really good opportunities for us as designers to be designing for this disruption, right? I think this pandemic has definitely, I guess, put a spotlight on some things. We see a lot about, the systemic poverty that you see in Montreal, for example, or the long-term care homes with the seniors who are dying. So all of a sudden, all of these things are visible to us. But I would say the one thing I'd like to highlight first, among many other things, would be more like the less visible health issues, which is what I'm thinking more the mental and emotional well-being of people. I think going now on our 9th week of physical isolation, I can only imagine that it's only, I guess the repercussions will only get worse as this gets longer. So I think as designers, our role is crucial because I think we can ask questions, think critically, and I see Angelica's hand coming up. No? Yeah, and I think our role is crucial. I think I see design living in the intersection with technology systems and services in order to innovate in the healthcare system. And I think I'll pause and see what Jules has to say.
Yep, all of that. I agree. It's interesting. One of the things that this situation has done, kind of to Alex's point, is it has massively accelerated the dysfunctional aspects of various dysfunctional aspects of healthcare. So long-term care, and I worked in long-term care for a long time, was always a catastrophe. It was just an acceptable kind of invisible one, and now it is, very much one of the most, I don't know,
hardest hit.
Cataclysmically hit areas in health, and that's going to create massive change. I'm already working with a number of bodies on that right now, who suddenly have an enthusiasm for change that, trust me, they did not have for a long time before. So, you know, that's good. You know, I mean, it took a lot of people dying, but it's really good. And it also bumps into, you know, underlying social issues, you know, like people being paid minimum wage to do really hard and sophisticated work, you know. It's very interesting. Another thing I've noticed is the way that the health system adopted things like email, you know, emergency room triage. So, you know, you can email an emergency room with a problem, not necessarily COVID. If you go down to St. Joe's at the bottom of my street, you get a response in 10 minutes, and then they quickly triage you to figure out what's up, and then they can direct you. And if you have a problem, you will get a teleconference with a doctor in 20 minutes, half an hour. Like, if we could take that capability and move it into non-COVID times, it would foundationally shift so much, you know, so many of the kind of intractable problems in healthcare. So, you know, so that's going to be huge. And then there's the, you know, the more, you know, non-healthcare system issues. To Alex's point, the importance of government and how government is, you know, has massively stepped up the role in, you know, the literal well-being and, you know, well-being and health of everyone. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of change, but unfortunately, you know, and I've been around healthcare long enough to notice, it's not as simple as seeing something that needs to happen and then everyone gets on board and it happens. You know, problems emerge because, you know, there are always countervailing interests, you know, like the Ontario Medical Association, the way that the fee-for-service system works in healthcare, and it sounds, you know, it's kind of controversial, but a lot of things have not evolved and changed because it's not in the best interests of you know, lobbies and bodies for those changes to take place. So, you know, I think one of the things that this situation has created is a kind of change in the zeitgeist. And so I am hopeful now, as those of you who know me know that I am not by nature an optimist, but at the same time, you know, there is definitely silver linings here where there's opportunity for, you know, design. And I'm going to be broad about this, where design in its many forms is likely to be able to contribute really significantly to, you know, foundational and positive shifts. It's a matter of how we are able to do that. And, you know, frankly, because, you know, things have just been boiled down to life or death situations now, I suspect there's an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and I think if I can add to it, I think seeing that the world is aging, right? There's more older people now than there are children. So if pandemics happen, say every 15 years, I don't know when I think SARS was about 15 years, right, ago. If we look ahead and in 15 years, I think if we don't make changes now, I would say the consequences would be so much greater than what we are experiencing today, right? So I think the idea of what Jules is saying about user-centered design, I think I'm also thinking the idea of patient-centered, and maybe I'm just broadly speaking that I think so much of healthcare is maybe focused on being efficient and I don't know, maybe cheaper or whatnot, like all these other things that we don't necessarily see, and it's not so patient focused. That I think if there's one thing COVID has maybe taught us is, and I say us, just the general public, is to focus on people and not necessarily on efficiency and convenience, as everything is so slow these days, right? Yeah. So I think I'm optimistic in terms of post-COVID, that it really is a time for innovation. And I think innovation happens when things are pretty archaic and, you know, nothing has changed for so long. And I think healthcare is in that right time where it's a need for innovation. So, and I think, yeah, as what Jules was saying, I think people are receptive for change.
Definitely. Yeah. Angelica, did you have something to add onto that?
I mean, I don't want to take up too much speakers' time because, yeah, I'm cognizant we have a lot of topic and a lot of speakers. Maybe a few things, and I see some of the open discussions here that come in from the panels are really interesting. I think the big question about values. What value do we place on care? And right now we are seeing caregiving that's not just hospitals. I mean, it is nurses right now, it is doctors and so forth. But will we place the same value on them post-COVID that we are providing them now? Like, do we value people that care for older people, people that care for children? It's all unpaid work, or has been over the centuries. Will we change the values of that? Or, and also these kind of like volunteer groups that have started to merge to help older neighbors and so forth, from the bottom up, like this.
Did we cut out there?
Yeah, I think Angelica's frozen.
Too much truth. They cut her connection.
Zoom couldn't take it.
Oh my goodness. A couple of us have been included in St. John's Health and have been working with the emergency workers there to communicate better what COVID, how to treat COVID, multiple languages and so forth. So we are stepping up, and we'll see designers and communities stepping up and coming up to the field to really respond to all these challenges. Like in Belgium, for instance, fashion designers are creating new patterns for protective garments that they're also now sewing at home to help the care workers. There's so much innovation going on. If you wanted to get a good glimpse of that, I recommend Alice Rawsthorne's Instagram site, and also Paola Antonelli. It's called Design Pandemic. Let me look it up, and I put it in the post. But it really showcases all the great work, also not just post-COVID, but that happened with the Ebola crisis in Africa. A lot of designers, architects stepping up to change and reframe and build environments that helped with these crisis situations. And I leave it to that.
Definitely. Yes.
So yeah, if I can just build on that, I think the reason why there are so many opportunities, and this is me speaking to maybe the graduating students, is that I think because many of the things are, if not directly impacting our health, it's indirectly impacting our health, right? From taking the transit system to the ability to wipe clean our jackets, first of all, like, you know, things that we never really thought about, or doing daily tasks like grocery shopping. So all of these things all of a sudden impact our health. And that's why I think there are just so many opportunities, because it's a lot of these spaces that we haven't actually, that hasn't been redesigned or hasn't been thought through yet. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Sure. So anyway.
Yeah, no, I think that was great points brought up, and it definitely, as a fresh graduate, gives me hope, because there are many opportunities that lie in this disrupted area that we are navigating right now. So thank you so much, faculty panel, for speaking on those discussion topics. I think it's brought up a lot of great points, and your audience members are definitely very intrigued by everything that's going on right now. So to our audience, make sure you write down your questions that you may have in the Q&A section, because we'll be addressing 3 questions at the end of our alumni panel, so hang tight. Now, moving to the second segment of tonight's event, we invite the alumni panel to speak on their experiences with post-graduation. This segment is a little bit more for anyone who may be graduating this year, and especially our own graduating class of 2020.
And maybe to also give an idea to people applying to industrial design, or people who are maybe halfway through. And again, on this panel, we have Javed Nasir, design consultant in IBM. And hi, Javid. Javid, from the time you were a design student stepping into the professional world to now being a design consultant in a multinational technology company, how's your mindset changed?
Okay, so I mean, first of all, thank you very, very much for inviting me to this panel. It's really pretty amazing to be a part of this, and I think it's like the first of its kind. So it's pretty cool how you guys have all been able to orchestrate all this. So to the question, so I mean, it's okay. So in some ways, it hasn't changed at all, and then in some ways that it has. So in the ways that it hasn't changed is that generally, you know, I think as a student, you generally have this sense that you don't really know what you're doing, and you kind of have this like fraud complex, and you're always questioning whether you actually do know what you're doing and whether you don't. And I think that doesn't really ever change, because as you're, you know, progressing through your kind of your career in design, you are continuously meeting new thresholds, right? And each of those thresholds, you know, leads you to discover how little you actually know. And so I think you're kind of constantly in this loop where you always feel like you don't really know what you're doing, but then, you know, obviously you look back and you realize how far you have come, but there's always going to be that threshold, that the next threshold that you have to pass. And I think you always feel that, but I think if that's how you feel, I think you're doing a good job. And I think that speaks more to your competency than the fact that maybe you actually don't know. Just because I know, you know, overconfidence is definitely a telltale sign that you don't actually know much of the subject matter. So in that way, I don't think anything has changed. I constantly still feel useless. So that'll come, and that's okay, I think. And the ways that it has changed. So one of the big things that I think my mentality has changed, which I guess came out of a lot to do with my thesis, is learning to be to have the courage to be vulnerable with the people that you work with. You know, it's a very difficult thing to be open about your gaps in your knowledge, to be open about, you know, asking dumb questions and having confidence in that. So I think navigating, you know, the workspace in this is very difficult to be open about the fact that you don't really know what's going on. But I think if you want to have a long-term game plan and actually learn, it's very conducive to really learning, to be vulnerable and to say, hey, you know what, I don't actually know this thing. Can you teach me? Hey, you know, I wasn't really clear on this particular thing. You'll at least I'm finding that it's actually helping me grow considerably more by being like that.
Awesome. Thank you. And you talked a lot about being a learning and being a constant learner. That's something that designers are always, you know, we're learning today because of COVID-19. We were learning before this too. So what are some new things you've discovered working at home?
Yeah. So the first thing is you need a good workspace, because you know, I was working on this like dingy little laptop for a while, and it definitely makes you realize that you need a good workspace. But I think the biggest thing that actually leads into a little bit of the discussion we were having before is the realization of how much we really need each other. You know, this whole situation has kind of fundamentally broken this idea that we're an individualistic culture. And that, I think, is something that's really interesting. And I think that's going to actually largely predict what's coming for us in the future for design, because right now what we're seeing is, you know, massive governmental changes. We're seeing a lot of different initiatives for healthcare, you know, and there's a lot of really innovative tech that's coming out that really deals with social change. And so I think that's kind of the biggest thing that I realized, you know, throughout all this, is that we need each other way more than we think we do, or that at least capitalism allows us to think we do. And so, I mean, and so that's the thing, is that now, you know, we're seeing, you know, these concepts that seemed like unrealistic, like universal basic income, for example. And I think that, like, I think design has a very, very interesting potential right now to start bleeding into policy design, start bleeding into actually being part of making laws. You know, and instead of looking at users as a cash cow, you know, looking at users and doing design thinking with citizens to find out what it is that, you know, the citizens of a populace are really looking for out of their government. And obviously now we're seeing the increase of government activity within the lives, within our daily lives, as Alex mentioned, right? So I think that's one of the biggest things that has really, like, not exactly shocked me, but has kind of fundamentally changed the way that I see, you know, how we run our culture, or as our society, right? It's very interesting, yeah.
Thank you so much, Avid. And, you know, you're working in a remote environment. Now we'll switch over to someone who's working in an opposite environment. Nick Coppolar is the founder of Studio and Workshop Area 91. He designs and produces retail environments, commercial interiors, and custom furniture. Nick, similar question. From the time you were a design student starting a business to now running a business, how's your mindset changed?
Well, same thing. First off, thanks for including me. This is really cool. It's so neat to see how you guys brought this to life. And honestly, it was super exciting to see all of my former professors here. This is great. So things that changed. Let me think. I did take some notes earlier today, so if you see me looking down, that's me looking at my notebook. I think something that changed from when I was in school to now is realizing that you really have to work hard to try and move past your own sort of desires with design. And maybe it's something to do with trend or something to do with the things that you can see looking left and right. And it's super important to remember that it's just not about you, it's actually for someone else. So that's sort of been an ongoing journey, and it's still something that continues today for me, is trying to realize that you really have to act as a bridge for a client. Like they may not have the vision in your head like already, and you have to act as a bridge to get them aligned with whatever vision you think is appropriate for the problem at hand. So that's something that's been ongoing. Other things that have changed from then until now. Let me think. I think there was, it's beautiful in a moment when you're a student and you sort of encouraged to have a lot of ideas and throw a lot of different concepts around, and you get a real special opportunity at OCAD to really play around with those. And you know, there's all the tools you need are right there at hand. So that's fabulous. And I think you end up putting a lot of value on your own ideas and the ideas that you're cultivating and having. And I think once you move, if you're in the business of creating physical solutions like me, then when you move out of school, you kind of quickly realize that, well, as a young designer, when you haven't really cut your teeth for too long yet, it's going to be very difficult to command value for those ideas. And what people really want is solutions and results, and they want to know when and how much. And that's sort of so you have to kind of learn to actually be willing to let go of your ideas. Let them go. If someone else can make use of that idea, let them run with it, because you'll have lots more. You're young, you're just out of school, you know, you're not fully formed as a designer, I think, when you graduate. And sometimes you think, oh, I'm a designer now, here I go. But actually it's sort of like when you're, you know, OCAD gives you an opportunity to learn about design, and then as soon as you leave, you get an opportunity to start practicing design. And I think you know, you have to be patient and remember that you need to get a lot of practice in before people are going to sort of put stock in your ideas.
Awesome, thank you. And we actually have quite a handful of students who want to go into traditional product design. Do you have any advice you would give them, especially during this current situation?
Yeah, during the current situation, oh boy. Something that's helped me a lot is remembering that, you know, going back to sort of the foundational skill set that I felt like OCAD really helped me cultivate, and that I got engaged with in having a studio. So doing things with your hands and trying to remember that actually, like for me personally, creativity comes much quicker, and the flow state of creativity is experienced when I'm actually working with my hands and I have materials in front of me and I'm manipulating them. And you know, maybe you have a problem with a machine and you have to solve that problem. Those are the moments when I feel the most creative, and not necessarily when I'm looking at content or looking at a screen, much like Yob was saying earlier. other things. Let's see. I did have quite a few pieces of advice. Something that Yob, like that I wrote down, just things like, oh, I wish I knew this, right? Something that Yob was saying too earlier about trying to find, like, you know, really looking past the screen. I've found that a lot of fellow young designers are very engrossed with SolidWorks or one of the 3D modeling programs. Something that I found is actually very helpful is to just actually forget about that stuff until you really, really need it. It's easy to convince yourself that you need those tools early on in the process, but you just don't. And you can, you know, you're kind of limited by your ability in that program. So it's like, if you can't draw a complex curve in SolidWorks, then you're not going to ideate with those complex curves, but you can draw them with your hands immediately. So that's, you know, that's something that I would encourage people to do, is just don't forget that the digital tool is sort of it's the last step when you want to bring it all together and make it real. But before then, you know, don't worry about it. Don't worry about that stuff. Let me think. You know, something that's personal for me too is, and it's a struggle that I think a lot of creative individuals share, is that you tend to, well, for me, and I hope other people identify with this, but I tend to you know, ruminate on a lot of different potentials. So if someone comes to you and says, you know, I want object X. Well, object X could be made out of anything. It could look like anything. It could be, the sky's the limit. So you end up sort of, you know, you get analysis paralysis where you're trying to analyze so many different options in so many different directions that you end up doing nothing. And that's sort of that's always the worst case scenario for me, is if you let something stir for so long that you didn't actually, you know, strike while the iron was hot. So that's a big one, is just really don't be afraid to put your creativity on the line. You know, that's part of that, being vulnerable. Like, don't worry about what other people are doing. Just push it out, put it out there. You know, if you did something, you took a picture of it, put it on the internet. Don't worry about it. If someone, you know, if someone does something with it you don't like, it doesn't matter. You'll have another idea. You'll make another thing. That's okay. Yeah, I don't know if there's another question that you have that you want to sort of riff.
Just sort of, I guess you're working in proximity with others. How's that going? What changes have you guys had to make at the studio?
Okay. Yeah, we have, there's 2 cabinet makers / woodworkers here. Myself, I primarily work in metal, and then another metal worker as well. So we've sort of had to stagger our time a little bit in the office, especially because that's when we're the closest. And thankfully it's a big enough space that we all have our individual work areas when we're actually like doing shop work. So it's been, you know, we're being careful. We're trying to obviously wash our hands as much as possible. We've got hand sanitizers all over the place. But it's been tricky because there's, you know, as much as we can be sort of mindful of it, we can't really control how other people interact with us when they come to our shop. So if we have a delivery or we have materials coming by, we kind of have to, like, you really got to be right there at the door ready for them, and you have to dictate that process. That's kind of the only way to do it right.
Okay, thank you so much. Your insights really help, especially with a lot of people wanting to go into physical spaces to work with one another. It's really helpful to get your advice.
Cool.
Now, I also just want to give another reminder to the audience. Put those questions in there. We'll definitely get to them.
Cool. Moving on, we have Denise Earle. She is currently a designer at Humanistic. Now, Denise, I'd just like to know, graduating at the top of your class and also a recipient of the Rocket Award from the Association of Accredited Industrial Designers for your work on your thesis project Sensorium 1. Can you please speak to your expectation versus reality post-grad?
Well, first of all, hi, Claire and Farzad. You guys are amazing. It's really exciting to be back and be a part of the community again. And congratulations to everyone who is graduating, and congrats on putting all of this together. I'm really happy to be here. So in my part, there was a big gap between my expectation and reality. I was kind of thinking that, okay, we graduated, we did this, you know, like first step, and I thought that kind of people were waiting for us with jobs open in their hands, and it wasn't like that at all. So you know, my expectation was that, okay, I'll start looking for a job and I'll probably get a job within like 3-4 months. The reality is it took me 8 months to get the job that I have now. And also, the expectation was that, okay, I'm going to apply to jobs, I'm going to hear back, I'm going to go to interviews. I think I applied to close to 200 jobs, and like more than half, I didn't hear anything. And some of them, you know, like the interview happened, didn't happen, but like it took much more time than I expected. And I had to change my whole strategy, because after the 4 months, and I was like, okay, I'm applying, no one's getting back, this is not going anywhere. I was like, I'm gonna meet people. And that's kind of how things started rolling. Because the reality that I understood is, yes, of course, it matters if you have the right skill set, if you have the motivation, like all of these of course matter, but what matters more is knowing the right people at the right time. Because, you know, if you know someone and you know you get along, and they're like, yeah, we like the way you're thinking, this and that, but they might not have the budget to hire you, they might not have the project to for you to, you know, contribute to. And so there's all of these different like things that contributed to, you know, getting a job. And what I've realized is actually getting the first job is the hardest one, because like a lot of people were just telling me, you're not experienced. And I was like, well, yeah, I just graduated, you know, and I have a few internships here and there, but their response to me were like, you know, we can't hire you, and I was like, well, how? Like, I graduated so I can get a job, and, you know, I can work in this field. So I was realizing that there's like this huge gap between, you know, the new graduates and what actually people are looking for. So also, I want to mention that while I started meeting people and talking to a lot of people, what I've realized that I had to figure out where exactly do I fit in. Because, you know, there's so many right now different ways that we can get involved with design. There's product design, UX design, this is, you know, like so many different sections. So it took me some time to actually figure out, oh, I think this is what I want to do, and then time for like everything to be aligned. So yeah.
Claire,
You're still muted.
Sorry, I'm totally I was just gonna say, that was such a realistic picture of what I think a lot of people go through. And I think that it gets swept under the rug, because all we really see are success stories, right? There are so many people that get, you know, snatched during GradEx, and it's like, wow, that's the dream. I'm going to do a great thesis project. This is going to define who I am as a designer, and I'm going to get a job at GradEx. But that's so not the case. And even like, I mean, you graduated at the top of your class, and you went through the Cedo Rocket show, and so there's like all of this, you know, it's like a boost, and you're like, okay, cool, this is going to happen for me. And you still had to work your butt off and wait 8 months later to land this first gig. So if you were to give 3 pieces of advice to yourself as a fresh graduate, what do you think those 3 pieces of advice would be?
So the first one is absolutely, it takes time. So, you know, just, it can take time. It can take a year. Yes, some people will get jobs at GradEx. Yes, some people are going to get jobs within 2 months or 3 months, but that doesn't mean you're not valuable as a designer. And that doesn't mean you're not going to bring value to where you go. And I think that's really important, because the more time was passing by, I was starting to question myself, like, you know, what is happening? Is this normal? Like, and then throughout like talking to many people, like it is normal. So, you know, just making sure that you know that, and don't attach that to your value, and just keep going. Like what I did is to always keep going. I tried different things, tried to talk to different people. And most of the time, like if you reach out to people and want to talk to you, usually people are really nice. And, they would give their time. And from one contact, then you can go through, like, one contact would give you like 5 or 6 or 3 or 2. Not everyone's going to get back to you, but you're kind of starting a thread, and you're also starting a community and kind of knowing people. And then after a while I had, oh, this person too? Oh, me too. Like, so after like a few months, like I felt like I was kind of, getting in the field and knowing like people who knew each other. So first advice, it takes time, chill out, just, don't attach that to your value. Keep going, keep fighting. Second one is keep learning. So, just don't just think like, oh my God, this is my only thing, I have to look for a job, but actually like try to evolve as a person, and try to evolve, like maybe try meditation or pick up something new that you've never done. Keep reading, keep learning, because all of the things that you're going to learn and read are somehow going to contribute to what you're going to be doing. So, don't just like make that your life. Also enjoy that time, because, we studied all of our lives, and we need the time to kind of process like, oh my God, this is a whole new life phase, So for me, like it was helpful to take this time and to actually absorb, like, okay, I've studied my whole life so far. Now it's a different, like steps. So take the time and learn new things and keep discovering. And the third one is really, I guess it's tied to the second one, but figure out your values. Like, figure out what's important for you. And the thing, like, why I'm mentioning this is, yes, a job title is important, and yes, like the kind of job you will get is important, but your values and why you want to work with the people that you're working is, I guess, to me, like more important. Because for me, it's all about the community. And like, for me, it was really important to work with people who care and who are passionate and, passionate about something, and we can all share this passion and we're working hard together, like, so for me, that was something that was really crucial, that played a lot of like in my decision making. So, find your values and speak your truth. When you're going to interviews, when you're going to meet people, like, speak and be honest about what you want, because people will actually, oh, okay, these are the things that you care about. So they will, you will be carried in this wave of finding a job. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, speaking your truth, so important. And I think people can tell when you're passionate about something because your eyes light up, and that's yeah, if you're passionate, of course, people want to work with people who are passionate about the same things that they are, right? That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now on to Jacob Kogan. Jacob is a design consultant at IBM. So I know you've been part of workshops at OCAD, and now you're running design workshops on your own for one of IBM's longtime clients, Toyota. So can you talk a bit about your expectations versus reality post-grad?
Hey, thank you very much, Claire. I just want to say, obviously, thank you for having me, but also, oh my God, there's a dog in my picture now. I'm being harassed. Get out of here. Working from home life. But okay, I just want to say, Denise, that was amazing. I love everything you just said there. I couldn't be more right. You also took everything I'm going to say. But okay, I'll start by answering Claire. So yeah, I work at IBM like Javed, but maybe a bit of a different situation. I kind of fell into the role being hired as a designer, but I'm hired into less of a designer part of the company. So I actually just float around between projects, and I'm just picked up by random people for random design tasks. And it's not what I was expecting. It's really funny, actually. I didn't really know. At first, I was really uncomfortable with it. I didn't know that was a role you could fill. I actually always thought I was not doing enough. But I learned, if there's anything, that you can be really flexible in where you actually look for roles as a designer. One thing that I'm sure Joop would agree with is the best thing you can market is not your title as a designer, but your skills. And dumbing them down and throwing in those ones that people can understand, like graphic design. And then you put in like design thinking as well. But make sure there's something people can understand. in facilitating design thinking workshops. It's been an incredible experience. I'd say one thing I've learned is to expect resistance. There's a lot of great things that designers can bring, and things like design thinking are burgeoning, are becoming more common. But like with clients, like there's a lot of resistance when people haven't done things like this for the first time. So expect that, but also to some extent be bold. Like try facilitating, just try thinking that you know enough, and try leading something. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't be blind. You should check at the end of the day, did we actually get results? Did we come away with any insights? Or was I just kind of pushing my way on people? But a lot of the time people won't tell you what to do. Sometimes you just have to try and see. Beyond that though, I'd say be really patient. Also, speaking to what Denise was talking about, embrace like disillusionment a little bit to some extent. After leaving university, like I got my job because I knew somebody. Like we live in a social job market. It's like there's this idea, my partner will love this, that we live in a meritocracy. There's this idea that the more you do, the better your chances will be. No. It's all about who you know. It's true. And yeah, embrace the discomfort actually that might come with coming out of university and trying to look for a job and feeling like maybe that you don't know anything, like feeling like you're not enough, feeling like all this self-doubt. And then sit in that and take all this time that you have, especially if you have free time, and ask yourself, where does this come from? Who is telling me that I don't have enough? Who is telling me that I'm not enough? And if you have time to sit with that, to talk to people about that, that can be one of the most transformative things beyond a job even. And kind of like what Java was speaking about, maybe you realize that there is, to some extent, like a question we ask is, how much is capitalism dictating the limits of our creativity? Coming into the world and getting a job, like you will encounter a huge amount of limits, are very different even just from school, which allow you a lot of freedom. So yeah, those are my little 2 cents there.
Amazing. Wow, you should have your own podcast. I was so engrossed the whole time. My other thing that I was going to ask you is that for somebody who is a fresh graduate wanting to pursue consultancy, I know that, you did not graduate thinking that you necessarily wanted to go into consultancy, but through your 1 year experience, what are 3 pieces of advice you'd give somebody that wanted to pursue this career path?
Well, okay, one thing I would say, obviously, if you're really into consultancy, one thing that you should do and be open to is learning a whole new language, learning business jargon. You're going to need to know it. And it's annoying and you might be resentful because you're like, oh, business people, who likes business people? But you're going to have to know it. So one way or another, if you can find ways to learn business jargon, you should do it. Going into consultancy. Yeah, work on your boundaries. Be willing to be able to spot the times when it's appropriate to stretch yourself. Sometimes you do have to put in some extra hours. Sometimes it's the right time, but not always. Some people in consultancy I find will always, every single day, do way more hours than they should be. You don't need to. And I think actually sitting in some of that discomfort and realizing that a lot of the judgment that might push you into stretching your boundaries is actually being imposed upon you can actually help you develop those boundaries. Because yeah, consultancy is super flexible. You set your own hours a lot. It's self-driven. So yeah, just be mindful of boundaries, be respectful, and but be willing to go the extra mile sometimes. And yeah, just be resourceful. Be willing to apply to roles that sound like design positions, but also have a bunch of different words that you don't know. Sometimes you might just be applying as a consultant or something like that. Especially with these large companies, there's some roles that might sound weird, but you might actually fit into and be able to inject your designerly skills once you're in there.
Cool. That's awesome. I think that was great advice. I'm sure people in the audience will, and I took a bit from that as well. So thank you.
Can I add something to that as well, if it's possible?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. So, consultancy, like in my mind, really just means that you work from a project to project basis. And I actually don't feel like it's that different from what we've been doing at OCAD even, because, everything that we do, it's like you kind of are hopping from one project to another. You're working with entirely different people with entirely different skill sets in some capacity. And it doesn't change that much with consulting. And so I think like you actually end up learning a considerable amount more in consulting than I think you would in a traditional job, just because, in the span of, 2.5 years, I can comfortably say that I've worked in like 7 different industries, so you end up learning quite a lot about so many different things. And it kind of gives you a good understanding of what it is that you actually like, and potentially what industry you would actually like to get into afterwards, if you really want to focus in on something. So I think it's a pretty interesting option. It's not something that I really knew about, but yes, there is a lot of business jargon. There's a lot of frustrations, and you're really going to hate business people a lot. It really comes down to their business requirements and the end goal for business. So, but I think it's a very interesting and viable option for a lot of people coming out of OCAD.
Yeah, 1000%. It sounds like a design buffet is what you're referring to consultancy as. You get a little bit of everything on that plate, and then once you're done, you can kind of take a full plate of seconds of the favorite thing that you like, right?
Yeah. But I mean, with consultancy also, like your existential crisis will literally never stop. So just be prepared.
Nick, that's something to say.
I could add that it's effectively the same in the world of physical production. If you're talking about project to project, I mean, every single time you sort of rattled off a few things that I do at the beginning, and it's like, well, yeah, sometimes you're an interior designer, sometimes you're a product designer, sometimes you're a fabricator. You never know. Right. And you do have to be really comfortable with the idea that, hey, you're going to enter in a process that you don't know everything, and that's fine. And you're going to get the help you need along the way. Especially when I think you're fresh out of school, it's important to just try as many things as you can.
1000%. Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, I mean, that concludes our alumni panel. Now we're gonna, switch it over to the Q&A section. Let's just see what the best 3 questions we got going on.
Awesome. We got the first question, and it is, do you think the term industrial design adequately represents graduate skills to possible employers?
Open panel, by the way. Whoever raises their hand first. Yes, Jules. You're muted, by the way.
Okay, here we go. Sorry. No, it absolutely does not. So looking at a question that Bev Dewan put up, and she observed that we used to be called product and service, which a long time ago, and then we became industrial design. The problem with industrial design is that nobody apart from ACEDO members knows what it means. So when you're trying to, articulate your value proposition to almost any client anywhere ever, unless they're a manufacturer or a retailer of products, you've got an uphill struggle to, and the panelists have described that more than adequately. So yeah, it's not the same. At the same time, what we have been as a program, I've been in the program for 1,000 years, is that there is never any kind of resting on laurels. The faculty are always working towards and trying to better define what we should be teaching, what we should be thinking about, and how we should articulate ourselves. So, I would personally love us to be called something else, but unfortunately that's a bit of a glacial process. But yeah, that's my contribution.
So maybe
awesome. Yes, sir.
So Jules, maybe in your line of thinking, maybe we can never find a name that covers our program, and maybe we just need to acknowledge that and call ourselves the formerly Industrial Design Program. Always open to something new.
The artist formerly known as Industrial Design. Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
Anyone else want to add to that? Angelica, I know you have so much to say on this topic. Go for it.
Yeah, I think I think what we all have to acknowledge also is that industrial design, or the way it was conceived as the field that somehow was wedged between architecture and the fine decorative arts for a long time, or that's how it started with the first industrial revolution, has a very short history, and we are still in the process of defining and refining what industrial design is. And what we can say is that it's a very context-aware or dependent field. And that context used to be industry and industrial processes. It still is in the fourth industrial revolution, where we see physical computing merging with like Internet of Things, physical object, merging with digital interfaces, merging with machine learning, and so forth. So these processes are definitely part of the way we practice, but I think what we need to be aware of is, like, yeah, the context in which we have created may not be the ones that we will continue to be what it is in. And I think it's up to us to find these disciplines in which we can really excel, bringing the interdisciplinarity and critical thinking too. Yeah, that's kind of like the challenge of being a relatively new profession, unlike architecture, for instance. But I think also in terms of scholarly work that is coming out right now, we really need to be recognized as a discipline of ourselves, but it's also our responsibility to shape and define what it is that we are doing. Yes, and the field is very broad, depending where and how you practice. And I think, like, that's why also sometimes you feel like that the faculty is contradicting each other, and it might be really confusing sometimes. And we do have heated discussions, don't worry. But I think that's exactly what's needed to kind of like, to shape this kind of like area in which we are practicing. And yes, it needs a lot of pioneering, and it does need a lot of explaining. Definitely. Unfortunately.
Yeah, we've all been trying to explain it to ourselves and amongst each other as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, Nick.
I just tend to completely avoid talking about what it is I should be called and just focus on what I think I can do to help.
Yes, that's actually, again, like not focusing on the job title, but the description of it instead. Yeah, definitely. Alex Manu.
Okay, well, I think we should divorce how people call the learning of industrial design to the practicing of industrial design. So what we learn, many professions are called very technical names at the learning end and completely different names at the outcome end. So at the outcome end, we are designers. At the learning end, we learn industrial design. Society doesn't care what we learn. Society cares what we outcome. So I'm not sure what engineers learn, but they call themselves engineers. But they can learn all sorts of very specific things, right? But in the end, for the professional field, it's called engineering. Same thing with designers. So stop defining what you do and just do it. Because you'll be reshaping what you do constantly in your life. So there's no point in defining anything right now. Any definition right now will keep you in a moment that doesn't even exist right now. So that's my advice after practicing design for zillions of years. And being the oldest panelist, by the way. Not the oldest in attendance, but the panelist.
So my question for you, Alex, is if you're saying not to define yourself, on platforms such as LinkedIn, where that is literally the first thing under your name, what would you write under there? Nothing?
Strategist.
But wouldn't that be a definition of yourself as well?
Well, that's a definition of how you approach things.
Okay.
You're approaching things from a strategy point of view, not from tactics. In other words, you are walking into a corporation, giving them a big vision, If they want you to implement it, you can do that as well. That's a tactical aspect. But your bigger brain is a brain in which you can get a lot of data points and make a consumer journey out of it. That's strategy. You can call it something else, but it's strategy. Writing a piece of music is strategy. Solving a problem in math is strategy. Playing chess is strategy.
Alex, you're giving me the feels.
Javed, you go for it.
No, I was actually, Alex mentioned something that like reminded me of something, and it's actually very true. You know, one of the questions that I got when I was interviewing at IBM with one of the lead designers there, because they were very skeptical of bringing me on board, and they were like, well, everything we do here is digital, and you come from a physical product design background. And so he kind of caught me off guard with it. But what I answered was this, and again, I don't know if this is necessarily a good answer, but it reminds me of what Alex was saying. And what I said was that industrial design, or everything that we learn in product design, is more a framework than anything. It's a framework for thinking. And so anything that we learn in product design, you know, even if you look at things like Dieter Rams's 10 principles that, you know, that everyone follows, like these are things that you can actually apply to any kind of problem that you're facing. So whether we're looking at, you know, information architecture, or we're looking at, you know, an actual, you know, an accessibility problem or something, industrial design to me, and everything that I think I've learned at OCAD, has been more around what the framework of design is and what the framework of thinking to solve problems is. And so I think that's where like the value lies, right? Whether we define it the way we do or not, but fundamentally the way we approach problems is the same. Whether it manifests itself in something physical, whether it manifests in something digital or spatial or, you know, theoretical, ultimately it's all the same, you know? So.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yo, yes.
So one of the other ways that you can approach this question is from down the road. So I'm not yet at the end of my road. I'm somewhere in the middle, I hope, as a professional. When I looked forward, when I was 20 your age, I had no clue what it was that I was. I knew I was creative. I knew I wanted to do certain things, I had certain values. But what I called myself, you know, I called myself interaction designer at the time. That seemed to be the term. But the clarity only comes when you look backwards. Then you see the sequence of projects that you've done. Then you see the bigger picture arise. And only then do you get a bit of a feeling for what you are. And even then things change, because you're a designer, then you become an educator, then you become an educator, designer, design educator, and new things happen. So the idea that you can call yourself something and that clarifies everything is a bit of an illusion. Now, it doesn't take away, you know, the challenge that you need to call yourself something, right? You cannot still call yourself, oh, I'm the solver of everything. You need to have a few keywords by which you can market yourself into some entry position. So call yourself design strategist, interaction designer, experience designer. That clarifies something for, let's say, the people in the market. As long as you accept for yourself that you will continue to grow over time and you will continue to find your way. The path forward looks obscure because it's meandering and many corners and many angles. Looking backward, it looks actually quite clear. Accept that uncertainty.
That's actually a really good point. The fact that this title, this label is for other people, but you know very clearly yourself that what you do and the details of that role. All right, let's move on to the next question. Let's take a look. What is the number one thing you can do to network, especially during quarantine? Or what are some good tips to consider when networking digitally or reaching out on professional platforms like LinkedIn?
The best way to network, is that the question?
Yeah. If it's not a question anyone wants, okay. Go for it.
Great question. I would, when I was your age, I actually went to some course for unemployed people, because I was unemployed. They gave me this amazing tip I have applied till today. Whenever you talk to somebody, don't ask them that you want a job. Just talk about yourself, about your interest, and then ask that person if they can refer to two people that can maybe help you further questions. Because if I would talk to you right now, oh Claire, how are you? Can you give me a job, please? Like, oh, who's this guy? What does he want, right?
Yeah.
But if you say, oh, you talk a bit about certain interests, and I ask you to mention 2 people, that then my journey can continue. And if you like me, think, hey, by the way, this could be something that you could work on in the future.
1000%. I think it was Alex, or yeah, okay, Alex, and then we'll go Jacob. I saw your hand, and then Denise. Yeah.
Well, when I graduated, I made a list of what I have to do to make it in design. So the list was very long, obviously, because I was coming from Romania. But it included joining an association in Canada, which I joined actually when I was in France. So before becoming Canadian, I joined ACIDO, or I made an application at least. So try to join all the professional things at the time was the right decision. Then go to conferences, go to international congresses, join boards and so on, was the right step at the time. It is no longer the same thing today. So in my view, the thing has shifted to a knowledge display platform, such as Medium. So Medium and LinkedIn and probably Issue will be the places I will publish if I was a recent graduate. And I will publish my thesis document at the minimum, definitely in Medium. And I will always comment on other people's publications in LinkedIn or Medium. That's how you create a network today. You cannot go to a conference anymore. Nobody cares who you are if you have not made your thinking manifest. You can make your thinking manifest either by writing actively or by commenting on other people's thoughts, which is acceptable as long as you pick the right people. So if you pick influencers, like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, Tim O'Reilly everybody was commenting on him and everybody sounded very smart, because just by quoting somebody smart, you sound smart. So that is the advice I have to give you right now. Write and publish on Medium as much as you can. And I give this advice to all my students anyway, and I'm using my son as a reference. We did exactly that, and he succeeded beautifully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Jacob, you were next.
All right, I'll just say a little bit because everyone captured kind of the general idea. Okay, but very practically, I also agree that if you really finding a job is about connecting, but not telling people that you want a job. Because for one thing, people wouldn't trust you right away anyways. They'll trust you a lot more once they've explained what they actually do. Mm-hmm. And then you come back and say, I've thought about it. And you know what you told me was the exact thing I want to do after I've done 10 other interviews. But what I would suggest to even just getting to that point is really, really practically, straight up asking people for those phone calls. You can reach out to people on LinkedIn, maybe even pay for the pro membership for a week, which allows you to message people that aren't in your network. Just ask for those phone calls and ask to kind of interview somebody about what they do, make them feel special. And to organize it, ask them for their email and send them a Google Calendar invite. Get past all the nonsense of what time. Send a calendar invite. Then they can move it automatically in the calendar if they want to. Really nitty gritty, but I think that makes the whole experience a lot easier for everybody. So yeah, that's it for me.
Perfect. Yeah. Denise, I believe you're next, and then Jules.
Yeah, so I guess also it's a combination of everyone. But so what I did was to add every person on LinkedIn when I was looking for a job. I was not even looking who they are. I was like, add. And then after a while, after some time passed, I'm like, okay, let me go back to all of these people who have no idea what they're doing, who they are. And then when I actually went through the list, I've seen that a lot of great people accepted the invitation. So then I've used this as a way, and I did pay for the pro so that I could be able to message people and get see people's emails, because sometimes people's emails are hidden. So you have to get that to see people's emails. And I sent basically an email to all of those people, introducing myself and throwing something in there that kind of so that people have an idea where to place me in their minds. But it was more about hey, I want to talk about you. I want to talk about your experience, and I want to talk about I just want to talk about design with you. It was never like, hey, I'm looking for a job. Like, obviously I stated that because that's my position, but it was more about creating a community and actually having a conversation about design with people. Like, whenever I went to those meetings, it was more about learning the other person. People love to talk about themselves. So when you ask questions like, oh, like, I've seen this project, and actually do the research. Like, when you're sending the email, do the research about what that person has done. Maybe find a project that interests you, and maybe you can mention, hey, I've seen in this project you've used this idea in this way. I'm really interested in talking about da 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 da. You know what I mean? Like, so find like common interests and things that both the people can be interested. So it's more of a conversation and an exchange rather than like, I want to take something from you, and you know, it's yeah.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I think for anyone in the audience that is doing their thesis next year, I think that's a great tactic, or not a tactic, great strategy for doing your expert interviews as well. Because I know personally, a lot of U of T professors, they have a lot of work online. And so if you actually do the research, you send them an email with an express interest and a connection to your thesis project, people are more than willing to help, but you need to do the research first. Sorry, Jules, you had something that you wanted to add.
Just to add to that, I mean, I think there's a lot of amazing points here. One of the things I think is really good to do is to be very unself-conscious about seeking direct knowledge. So, you know, if you find a company or an outfit or a practitioner or anyone who's doing something that you think is amazing and really interesting, even if it's just like, you know, they have a design firm, you know, you can reach out to them and, like, to Job's point, not say, hey, I'm looking for a job. You can characterize it as saying, I'd really, you know, I've recently graduated and I really want to find more out about design practices, you know. So you're likely to get an invitation, and you can start a conversation. It's not threatening. You're not asking for anything, you know, and in those conversations, value can occur. The other thing I think is maybe just, you know, as an additional point, is if you're firing out job applications in every direction and you get a job offer that maybe isn't the dream job, you know, take it. You know, just like start somewhere, because the job you get is not necessarily the job you end with. And you are possibly, obviously there's some jobs it's like, nah, you know, but you're then closer to the arena and the context of design activity. You're going to start meeting people, you're going to build skill, you're going to take a long view, you know, or take a longer view, you know, in terms of, and don't, I mean, this may be self-evident, but don't imagine that you're going to just look and look and look and then find the ideal job. You're going to look and look and look and perhaps find a job which is like, this'll do just now, you know, and it's going to get me 6 months, 3 months, a year. It's going to get me farther down the road to where, and, you know, also be aware of the fact that you are going to change throughout that process as well. You know, I mean, I don't think anyone, I mean, starts off or ends in the job they started with. And they evolve as designers, or their interests and capabilities evolve over time as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, Franny.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, I think in this time of pandemic, the great thing is that everyone's at home, right? And that's actually what I told my thesis students, Wesley and I did anyway, is that people have the time right now. And I think it may be intimidating, but I think people are more than happy to help. So I think, just to echo what everyone's saying, ask for advice. And I think you'll be surprised as to how generous people will be with that request.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We have another question that's, it has to do with design thinking. And it's seeing as design thinking is a growing trend in other industries, business consulting, engineering, healthcare, etc. Are design generalists being obsolete, or will their value increase?
Jules Goss.
Okay, so the problem with design thinking, it is ambiguous, and in fact is as ambiguous as any other design terminology. And also it tends to be practiced by anyone who can basically describe themselves as a design thinker. So it's an increasingly crowded field with a very variable set of engagements and understandings. So no, I think the answer is no. I think in some ways, I think you have to look into what you mean by design generalist, but I think what design thinking is really talking about is and it was referenced earlier on, the frameworks and attitudes intrinsic, and let's say to think something we try and teach our students at OCAD is, sure, we can, you're going to be in the wood shop and you're going to figure out how to do a dovetail joint if you're any good. But that's, merely a part of, this understanding of going from, one state to a desired state, and that essentially is design thinking in its various forms. So don't ever be afraid to jump into design thinking. You guys are more equipped, in my opinion, to call yourselves design thinkers than 80% of the so-called practitioners. Some are amazing. There are design thinkers who are staggeringly good, but there's a lot of clutter in the water right now.
And we also all have a lot of experience practicing it. So to speak on people who might feel like people are encroaching in our territory, I don't think it's that way at all. I think it's something that can be applied in a lot of places. I think Jacob was next, and then we'll go to Alex.
Sure. Yeah, I know that that I'm characterized as someone who's doing a lot of design thinking these days, and actually, it's definitely a central part of my role right now. But I'd also agree the term is so annoying. It's very ambiguous. For some people, it means design research. For some people, it means workshops, and of course, it can just reference this entire kind of like mindset of how you carry yourself and how you work. Are you like iterative? Are you reflective? Do you prototype? So I'm not exactly sure how it relates to design generalists becoming obsolete, but I would say coming out of OCAD, design thinking is something that you can apply in your everyday life. And then there's also this emerging trend of design thinking just for the sake of innovation. There's an emerging trend of companies who teach design thinking to other companies. It's kind of like a skill that you can activate people with. It's kind of like a workshop style that you can share to other people. So that in itself actually I think is a marketable skill and is a growing domain. And to get expertise in that is really just about having a couple frameworks, a couple kind of like workshop styles under your belt, and then you can just do it, honestly. I find coming out of OCAD, a lot of people are very bad at it, but they do call themselves design thinkers. But beyond design thinking, one thing that I have really learned in the last year or so, just through my acquaintances, is that I thought that through design thinking and through design research methods, that designers were also very good at doing research. But one thing I've been very humbled at in the last few years, or in the last year, is that actually doing research in general, a lot of folks can do it a lot more rigorously, I'd say, than designers fresh out of OCAD. So just keep your eyes and ears open to people who maybe studied the arts or humanities or the social sciences, because they can definitely bring in a lot of those research skills that can definitely make your design thinking a lot more robust.
Alex, do you have anything to add to that?
So the question was if the generalists are being, destroyed by the design thinking movement. So this started, let's say 2010 roughly. The Rotman School of Management was very keen on promoting design, and they couldn't promote the making of things, so they promoted the thinking of things. So that's where design thinking starts in a way. The great news I have for you is that actually only designers can design in the design thinking part, which is the ideation. So when I hear about IBM talking about design thinking, they're thinking empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test, and so on. All the steps. These are very easy to do until you get to ideate. So you get to ideate and you say, hey, Alex, can you come and, hey, Denise, hey, Farzad, hey, Jacob, let's do some design work now. So fear nothing, okay? More people talk about design thinking, more work for designers. So let them think they can design, perfect. By the time they figure out they can't, they get stuck into a process for which they paid $40,000 to Jacob and IBM, and then they call you, which is great.
Awesome, thank you. Anybody else have anything to add? Javid?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. Like, design thinking is something that was kind of created to explain design to people that don't understand design. And I think that's what ultimately is so interesting about it, is that when I was coming out of school and I kept hearing design thinking and stuff, I was actually really intimidated by this, because I was like, what is this thing that I don't know? You know, why do all these business people like say design thinking and I don't really know it? But as I'm, progressing through this, and now I'm understanding design thinking, I'm realizing that it's actually the way we think. It's just the way that we think. And it was just like this transition to help business people understand what design is. And so design thinking isn't something that's scary, or it shouldn't be scary to designers, because this is actually just how we think that has been formalized for people that don't understand anything about design. So don't be intimidated by this thing that's called in the design thinking. Obviously, there's value in structure, in like understanding the structure of design thinking, and there's formal processes and things that you can learn from. But but don't be afraid of it. It is just the way that we think. We're actually ahead of the curve, and design thinking is a training wheels for people that don't really understand it, aka business people.
I'm really glad you said that, because this entire time I was getting a little nervous. I was like, design thinking.
Really?
Yeah, that was on the ball.
Maybe you can add to that a little bit.
You're muted, by the way.
Yeah.
So there's maybe one thing to remark on this is that indeed there's a lot of people who do two-day trading, and then they call themselves a design thinker. But I always use this example, let's say you have a big, bad, rotten teeth in your mouth, and there's two people in front of you. One is a dentist who did 5 years of dentistry and really went on all the craft in making, or there's the person who has the two-day strategic thinking certificate, right? Well, where do you go? Like, obviously you go to the real dentist. But the problem is, if you translate this analogy towards design, is that a lot of designers are intimidated by the people in business that have hijacked their language. So because they act from an MBA point of view or whatnot, you become insecure. So the one thing that you guys need to do better, and one thing we need to teach you better, is really what is underneath the hood of the car. I mean, everybody can drive the car, but what is underneath? And that has been one of my arguments for years and years now, that so many of these valuable skills and competencies that you learn manually by engaged in collaborative processes, actually build those higher level cognitive skills. And that's why it takes multiple years before you get those skills, because they're all rooted in activity, not in reading a book or doing a two-day course. I could talk for 2 hours about that. I shouldn't, but the bottom line is you guys know a lot more than you actually know, if you know what I mean.
That's really reassuring. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for all the audience questions. And yeah, we'd like to close off a little bit. I kind of want to talk about how, as designers and creatives, we're enabled with the tools and methodologies to change organizations and practices for the better. Now more than ever, we have the responsibility to exercise our strengths for the benefits of humanity. Redefining normal will involve looking beyond human-centered design and focused on design for humanity.
And this concludes this year's student-led opening reception for the ID Grad Show. I'd like to thank you, our faculty and alumni panelists, for contributing to tonight's discussion. And we'd also like to thank you, the audience, for tuning in to see what the future has in store.
And definitely don't forget to follow us on Instagram at OCADU ID to see weekly updates and more design work. And check out our website for full project descriptions and links to more student works. And a big, big shout out to the ID graduating class of 2020.
The GradEx Committee, for all of your relentless perseverance, because this would not have been possible without you.
Our professors for their mentorship and support.
My family, who's tuning in from the West Coast. What up, Van City?
And a very special thanks to Angelica and Job for your guidance and support in the last couple of weeks. You're a gang.
That's it. Have a good night.
Here's some closing remarks from Reed too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amazing. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone.
One more remark. One more remark. The moment that we can get a drink,
Yes.
should. So
Yes.
stay in touch. Let's hang out. Whatever is going to happen, let's do the other celebration as well.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes.
Cheers.
Awesome.
Before everyone leaves, I'd just like to thank everyone that was part and worked behind the scenes to set this up. First off, of course, our amazing hosts, Claire and Farzad, our amazing panel of professors, Alex Minot, Angelica, Jules, Yob, and Rani, our amazing alumni students, Denise, Jacob, Javid, and Nick, our amazing producers, Matheson, and myself, Reed, amazing. And behind the scenes, we have an amazing grad show committee that helped us out. Aiden, Taylor, Claire helped there, Matheson, Singyu, Adam, Farzad, Jacob, Priscilla, and Stephen, and Yoksna, and of course, our faculty advisor, Yob, for helping us through all the rough patches and making this smooth sailing to where we are now. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight here.
Thank
you,
you.
everyone. Have a good night.
Bye,
Good
guys. Good
night.
night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys. Great job.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.